What if the son you thought was lost forever suddenly appeared, gasping for breath in the passenger seat of a speeding car? The night stretched long and empty, the hum of the highway filling the quiet inside Officer Malcolm Hayes' cruiser. The green glow of the speed radar flickered, casting faint shadows over the console. His fingers drummed against the wheel, but his mind was elsewhere. It had been 6 months. 6 months since his son Elijah had disappeared without a trace. No ransom call, no sightings, just gone. Malcolm had torn his life apart looking for him, burned through every contact, kicked in every door that felt even a little suspicious. But the case had gone cold, and the department had urged him, gently, then firmly, to move on. Sometimes kids just run away, they said. Maybe he didn't want to be found. Bullshit. Elijah wouldn't just leave. The department had been useless, their searches half-hearted, their sympathy thin. So Malcolm had taken a leave of absence, spending every waking moment searching for his boy. And after months of nothing, of silence so thick it felt like drowning, he'd finally come back to the force. Not because he was ready, but because pretending to be normal was the only way to keep from falling apart. Then, his radar beeped. 94 miles per hour. A silver sedan tore past, weaving through lanes like a panicked animal. Instinct took over. Malcolm flipped his lights on, sirens screaming to life. He yanked the wheel and pulled onto the highway, pressing the accelerator. The sedan hesitated, swerving slightly, then jerked toward the shoulder, skidding to a rough stop. Malcolm pulled in behind it, adrenaline steadying his hands. This was routine. Speeders always had an excuse. Late for work, didn't see the limit, just trying to get home. He'd heard them all. But as he stepped out and approached the driver's side, something felt off. The driver, a black woman in blue scrubs, was gripping the wheel tight enough for her knuckles to pale. A nurse, probably coming off a long shift. Her eyes darted to him, wide and full of something raw. Fear. Not the kind of fear that came from getting pulled over. The kind that came from something much worse. Then he saw the passenger, and his world stopped. Elijah. His son. His missing son. Sick, sweating, slumped against the seat, his chest rising and falling in sharp, desperate gasps. Malcolm barely registered the woman fumbling with the window, her voice high and shaking. "Officer, please. He can't breathe. I need to get him to the hospital. Now." Malcolm's pulse roared in his ears, his vision blurred at the edges. His son, here, alive. Barely. Malcolm's breath came hard and fast, his mind struggling to catch up. His son, Elijah, was right in front of him. Flesh and blood. Barely conscious, barely breathing. The nurse, whoever she was, kept talking, but the words blurred together in the storm inside his head. Questions screamed at him. Where has he been? Who took him? Why is he with her? But then Elijah coughed, a deep, rattling sound, his whole body trembling from the force of it. No time. Malcolm snapped into action. "Screw this," he muttered, turning on his heel. He bolted back to his cruiser, throwing open the door. "Follow me. I'll clear the road." The nurse, Nia Carter, according to her hospital badge, didn't hesitate. Tires screeched as she jerked the sedan back onto the highway, right on his tail. Malcolm floored it, hitting his lights and sirens again, weaving through traffic like a battering ram. His hand flew to the radio. "Dispatch, Officer Hayes requesting medical emergency clearance, code blue. I have a critical patient en route to County General. I need." Static. Malcolm frowned. Tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy?" More static. Then, suddenly, a voice. Flat. Unfamiliar. "Turn around, Officer Hayes." His stomach dropped. That wasn't dispatch. A glance in the rearview mirror sent a fresh bolt of ice down his spine. A black SUV was closing in behind Nia's car. Fast. This wasn't random. Whoever was on that radio, they knew exactly who he was, and more importantly, who he had with him. His grip tightened on the wheel. "Nia, you got Bluetooth." Her voice crackled through his car speakers. "Yeah, then start talking. Now." A pause. Then, steady but tense, she spoke. "I work at a private clinic. Elijah showed up last night, alone, terrified, sick as hell. He begged me not to call the cops." Malcolm's throat closed up. "Why?" Silence. Then, weak and rasping, his son's voice. "Because, Dad." Elijah coughed hard, struggling to get the words out. "It was cops." Malcolm felt the air leave his lungs. Elijah coughed again, then forced himself to keep talking. "I saw them kill someone. An unarmed witness. They thought I was asleep in the car, but I saw everything." Malcolm's grip on the wheel turned bone-white. The night Elijah disappeared, he had been with his best friend, Jordan, hanging out near an abandoned construction site. Jordan had vanished that same night. The official report had called it a runaway case, just another kid who didn't want to be found. Now, Malcolm knew the truth. Jordan hadn't run. Jordan had been murdered, and Elijah had seen it. The SUV behind them sped up, closing the distance. Malcolm's rage crystallized into something cold, calculated. His son had spent 6 months in hell. And now, they'd wanted to finish the job. Not today. The black SUV in the rearview mirror loomed closer, its headlights flaring like predator's eyes. Malcolm's pulse pounded, but his grip on the wheel stayed firm. He had spent 6 months drowning in helplessness, 6 months staring at a blank wall where his son's face should have been. But now he had Elijah back. Now he had answers. And now, they had made the mistake of coming after him. "Nia," Malcolm said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. "How far to the hospital?" 10 minutes, maybe less, if we don't get stopped." The SUV veered left, cutting into the next lane, creeping up beside Nia's sit-in. They weren't going to let them make it. "Brace yourself," Malcolm said. Then he slammed the brakes. The cruiser fishtailed violently, tires screaming. The SUV driver, caught off guard, yanked the wheel too hard, trying to avoid rear-ending him. It swerved, bouncing off the divider before struggling to regain control. Malcolm punched the gas, surging forward again. "Take the next exit," he barked into the radio. Nia didn't hesitate. Her car jerked right, tires skidding as she peeled off the highway. Malcolm followed, his cruiser hugging the curve, his heart hammering as they shot onto a dimly lit service road leading to the old rail yard. The SUV recovered quickly. Too quickly. "They're still on us," Nia warned, her voice sharp with tension. Malcolm already knew. He could feel the engine's growl closing in, see the shadow swallowing the space between them. But he wasn't running. Not anymore. The road ahead stretched into darkness, empty and silent. A perfect place to end this. "Elijah," Malcolm said, voice softer now. "You with me?" A weak sound came from the back seat. "Yeah." "Good," Malcolm said. "I need you to hold on just a little longer, okay?" His son didn't answer, but he was still breathing. That was enough. The rail yard loomed ahead, abandoned and sprawling, a maze of rusted freight cars and skeletal warehouses. Perfect. Malcolm slammed the wheel left, his cruiser skidding onto the gravel, kicking up a cloud of dust. Nia's sedan followed, tires bouncing over the uneven ground. The SUV barreled in behind them. Malcolm killed the sirens, rolling to a stop in the shadows of an old train depot. Nia flung open the back door, reaching for Elijah. His head lolled weakly as she pulled him into her arms. "Stay low," Malcolm ordered. He stepped out of the cruiser, drawing his gun. Then, the SUV's doors opened. 4 men stepped out, armed, and leading them. Lieutenant Derek Moore. Malcolm's stomach turned to stone. His boss. his mentor. The same man who had helped him file Elijah's missing persons report. Moore exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You should have let this go, Malcolm." Malcolm stepped forward, gun raised. "You put a hit out on my son." Moore didn't deny it. "Elijah saw something he shouldn't have," Moore said calmly. "We gave him a chance to disappear quietly. Instead, we're here." His tone was almost regretful. "Almost. Hand him over," Moore continued. "We end this now." Malcolm's hand tightened on the trigger. "Yeah," he muttered. "We can." Then, gunfire erupted. Gunfire ripped through the night. Malcolm dove behind the hood of his cruiser as bullets punched into metal, shattering the windshield. Sparks flew. Glass rained down. But he barely felt it. His mind was locked on one thing: his son. "Elijah, stay down," he barked. Nia had already pulled Elijah behind an abandoned freight car, shielding him with her body. His son was barely conscious, wheezing, each breath a struggle. Malcolm's heart clenched. "Hold on, kid. Just hold on." Another shot ricocheted off the train tracks near his feet. He popped up, returning fire. His first shot caught one of Moore's men in the shoulder, sending him spinning to the ground with a scream. 3 left. Moore ducked behind the SUV, barking orders. "Flank him. Take him alive if you can, but don't let him call for backup." Too late. Malcolm hit his radio, switching to an open frequency. "All units, this is Officer Malcolm Hayes, badge 2417. I am reporting a corrupt faction within our department, led by Lieutenant Moore. They murdered an unarmed witness, and they are trying to kill my son. I need immediate medical support. Now." Silence. Then static. Malcolm held his breath. Then, finally, a voice. "Copy that, Officer Hayes. Units en route." A pause. Then another voice, one he recognized. "Hold on, Malcolm. We're coming." Moore's men hesitated, hearing the transmission. Their window of opportunity was closing. Moore knew it. He stepped out from behind the SUV, his gun trained on Malcolm. "You don't have to die here, Hayes." Malcolm stared him down. "Neither do you." A long silence. Then Moore exhaled. "Fine." He squeezed the trigger. Malcolm fired first. His shot caught Moore square in the chest. The older man staggered, eyes wide with disbelief, before collapsing onto the dirt. The 2 remaining men bolted. Malcolm let them go. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights cut through the night as patrol cars roared onto the scene. Malcolm didn't lower his gun until the officers swarmed in, weapons raised. "Officer Hayes, stand down." He dropped the gun. Then, finally, he turned to his son. Nia was still holding Elijah, her fingers pressed against his pulse. "He's still breathing," she whispered. "But we need to move. Now." Paramedics rushed in, lifting Elijah onto a stretcher. Malcolm followed, barely hearing the commotion around him. His son was alive. That was all that mattered. As they loaded Elijah into the ambulance, Malcolm climbed in after him. One of the officers jogged up. "What about Moore?" Malcolm didn't look back. "Let the bastards rot." The ambulance doors slammed shut. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. But Malcolm had his son back. And now, he was going to burn them all to the ground. Thanks for watching. Kindly share, like, and subscribe. Kindly endeavor to watch the next interesting tales on your screen.